It's time for another exciting episode of Ask Us Anything Only. This week, it is a special Planet of the Apes edition where we've taken all of your POTA questions. So, we had a whole bunch of questions, a lot of them about the reboot trilogy and also the original 1960s version. But we're going to kick things off with at Kailash Laxman, who asks, do you think the POTA reboot trilogy is severely underrated?
Yes.
I do as well. I
Yes.
think it is critically acclaimed, but I do believe not enough people have watched it.
I think there's some generational baggage with regards to Planet of the Apes because people are still thinking of the Charlton Heston one, which is very sci-fi. There's a time travel, there's space, all that science-y stuff. Whereas the reboots have been very much drama-based. The Matt Reeves movies were very action-oriented, but it still was very... I don't want to use human drama because our lead characters are not humans, but it's really just emotional stuff. And I think people forget that. People really just tend to paint the Planet of the Apes films as this sci-fi monkeys taking over the world thing. But they forget that there's a lot of really good storytelling.
The thing to consider with the POTA reboot trilogy is if you are a fan of zombie fiction, if you are a fan of any kind of drama involving human folly, all of those same themes exist within the Planet of the Apes trilogy. Like the first one with Rise starts off in a laboratory. It's about capitalism and science, very prescient in its idea of a pandemic and what that can do. This was released in 2011, way before we even used the word pandemic in our everyday parlance. And it's an interesting concept because it doesn't turn humans into mindless zombies. It either kills them or reduces them to a primitive state, mirroring what the apes used to be. And so all of that makes for just very fertile storytelling ground. And I think those three movies exploited that in really good ways, while you talk about the Matt Reeves movies being action-packed, while not forgetting all of the action. Like the action is really, really good. No, Kailash, you're absolutely right. Severely, severely underrated. I think people often forget how good a trilogy it is when they make those recommendations, when you encounter listicles on the internet going, hey, these are a list of the best trilogies ever made, you know?
I can't speak for you, but I always forget how good this trilogy is. And I don't know why. I'm always surprised at how much I love these films whenever I do get a chance to put them on. But like, it's not an immediate reaction from me because we're always thinking of the big ones, right? We always think of the Marvel stuff. We think about Star Wars. But when Planet of the Apes came out, I remember just being blown away at how good they were.
Yeah.
So the next two questions are kind of in the same vein, I think. At Zoro Haddad and Thinking of Cinema asks, which are your favorite Caesar-focused films or your favorite films in the POTA trilogy? I think my answer to this is yes.
Oh, do you not have a favorite? Like how Empire Strikes Back is my favorite Star Wars movie. Do you not have a favorite from a trilogy?
No, but I look at the three as a piece. And I'm not talking about Taken 1, 2, and 3, which I have never seen, by the way. But like, because these three films feel like of a piece, right? Like the Lord of the Rings trilogy.
Wait. Are you telling me, Bahir, that even with Star Wars,
Yeah.
like the OG trilogy, you always watch it as a piece? Is there not a single movie that you've seen more than the others?
There is, but in my brain, I see them as a piece. So I think of the original trilogy as a piece. I think of the prequels as a piece. And I think of the new three as a piece. So when I do watch them, it's always with the intention of seeing all three. I never just go, I'm going to watch the Two Towers. That just seems crazy talk.
Oh, mate. I will sit down and just watch Empire Strikes Back and then leave it.
I can't.
Or just watch The Last Jedi and then leave it.
Oh, I can't because I'm just like, I know there's something that comes before this and I know it goes somewhere else.
But also I've seen it so many times that I can recite the movie line for line, so it doesn't really matter.
But my memory is shit.
Okay.
So like, okay, The difference would be something like Indiana Jones. I can watch Crystal Skull. Well, I don't want to watch Crystal Skull, but I can watch them on their own.
But they're very standalone lah.
I mean, the perfect example for me is The Lord of the Rings. I can't just put on Return of the King just because I feel like watching Return of the King. If I feel like watching Return of the King, I have to start with The Fellowship.
Wow.
Yeah, dude, my weekend is done. That's all I'm doing that Saturday, which is what I might be doing tomorrow. But
wow. Okay.
talking about Planet of the Apes, and that's why it's hard for me to rewatch it, because I cannot just start at the end to refresh my memory about what happens so I can watch this one. I have to go from the beginning.
So for me, I would say War is my favorite. And I've seen it more times than the others. I will also say yes. I will go with you on that. I enjoy all three movies tremendously. And even occasionally when I think, oh, maybe this movie wasn't as good as the others, I rewatch it and then I'm like, oh, actually, it's really good. Sure, I have those moments, but War for me is my favorite. I think I am most emotionally connected to that film. Like every time I watch that movie, I feel incredibly moved.
I agree. And I think for me, the problem with rewatching War is that not only because I know what happens, but I want to see Caesar win. So I have to watch Rise and Dawn because, yes, he wins in War of the Planet of the Apes, but we know what happens at the end. He dies. So I want to see the life and times of Caesar before I get there. So I have to watch all three, which is why I haven't seen it in a long time.
Fair. I get that.
Is it fair though?
I think it's fair. I think it's a fair assessment of your feelings when it comes to watching these movies. And I acknowledge your feelings by it.
Yeah. Logic notwithstanding.
At Muart Deep asks, that's a cool name, by the way.
That's great name.
At Muart Deep asks, do you feel weird watching apes acting in front of the camera? I think if it wasn't as good as it is, I would feel weird. I think sometimes watching those 70s movies does pull you out of it because, yeah, the makeup and stuff is really vintage. And you got to be in the right place to actually embrace all of that and suspend some disbelief. But these recent movies have been done so very well that you forget that you're watching monkeys.
But I would say even just the jump between Rise and Dawn, which was just 3 years, watching Rise of the Planet of the Apes, it looks good, but in 2024, you're like, lighting's a little off. That shading's not so great. But from Dawn onwards, I forget. There aren't monkeys out there riding horses with shotguns. At Jagger asks, do I have to recap Rise, Dawn, War before watching Kingdom?
This is a very popular question. We've been getting a lot of it in our DMs and also on the comments of our Instagram page. And Bahir, you might be the best person to answer this because you went into this not having done a rewatch.
Yes, I would advise it. It's not a hard rule if you've got better memory than I have, or if you've seen it within, say, the last 3 years, I think you're pretty safe. But I think you should watch the original three, especially if you haven't seen it. If you haven't seen it, I feel like you kind of want to watch those three first so you really get into the mood for Kingdom.
Also, if you haven't seen it, I feel like it has to be on your list of movies that you should watch.
Yes.
If you're someone who likes cinema and enjoys movies, I think it's one of those must-watch trilogies because it's so well done. And so, as a rule, even if there wasn't a Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, we would encourage you to watch those movies.
Yes.
That said, if you do want to go and watch this movie like right now, go for it. I don't think you will be lost.
Yeah.
I think you will still have a very good time at the cinema. And I think you may have questions coming out of the movie, which, if you tune into Disney Plus Hotstar, all of the movies are there and you can just click play whenever you want. So you can do that. If you don't have the time for that, you can go on YouTube, you can go on Instagram, you can check out our recap. I think if you need like a quick reminder of key moments before going in to watch this movie, then do that. But we highly encourage you watch Rise, Dawn, and War.
Yeah.
At Travesty and at Magat Aiman had similar questions as well. With the most recent trilogy, which already set a very high bar, is the OG from Charlton Heston worth watching in this era? Magat Aiman says, I absolutely adore the Matt Reeves trilogy. Never seen the OG films that came before. Should I? First of all, it's funny that people call it the Matt Reeves trilogy,
Yeah.
but actually Rise of the Planet of the Apes was directed by Rupert Wyatt. But the poor guy's forgotten because Matt Reeves did such a great job with War and Dawn. There are 5 original movies, and I will say that they are products of the late 60s and early 70s. And so you need to have that in your brain going into it, because I'm not just talking about the look and the visual
Yeah.
effects. Movies were written and paced very differently back then. That said, the original, the first film, is a landmark in cinema.
Yeah.
Like, the story is amazing. Charlton Heston is great. The apes are absolutely fantastic for the time. And then that twist, man. Like, when I was a kid, I didn't know what the twist was when I first watched the movie. And of course, when that twist happens, it is a Darth Vader level twist. It'll blow your freaking mind.
For me, I haven't seen anything other than the Charlton Heston original. I haven't seen any of the other ones that came after the Charlton Heston version. But that Charlton Heston one, I saw it when I was too young. So I didn't understand what it meant at the end. When Charlton Heston's on the beach screaming after having seen the
Statue of Liberty.
Oh, I'm trying to be a little...
I think we can say that light came out in the 60s.
Yeah, but I don't want to spoil it for these guys who haven't seen it.
But the thing is, about that movie, even if you haven't seen it, the fucking DVD poster has the Statue of Liberty on it.
That's true, loud.
So I think that
Fine.
ship has sailed.
Fine, that ship's gone. Okay. When Charlton Heston's on the beach, when he sees the Statue of Liberty and he says his line, when I first saw it, I didn't understand what he meant. I was too stupid to figure it out. But even rewatching it, when I finally understood what he meant, it was such a ground shaking moment, right? That realization at the end of that, I think it made the film worth watching just to get there, just to see Charlton Heston scream that line.
And even if you know it, even if you know the twist, actually the journey that takes place in that film is phenomenal. So by the time you get to the end, no matter how many times you've seen it, I still feel that it's impactful.
I will also say, in your conversation with director Wes Ball, who directed the recent Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, he spoke about how his film is on a journey to get to that Charlton Heston Planet of the Apes. And that excites me. That excites me in that, because there was always, I wouldn't say official talk, but rumors that the original 3, Rise, Dawn, and War, were not in the same universe as the Charlton Heston Planet of the Apes.
Yes and no, because in Rise, on the TV in the background, there is a conversation about astronauts getting lost in space.
There's issues with timelines and all that stuff. But I like that Wes Ball is looking at that as the destination to his journey. So that excites me, because that film was beautiful. It's not great in production. It's questionable in 2024. But just what that movie kicked off, just what that movie made you ask, is itself worth watching.
Now, the other films are interesting in their own right. Not all of them are great. Like, I think Beneath the Planet of the Apes, the second movie, isn't the best of the lot, but the ideas within that movie are very, very cool. So there is another astronaut that crash lands on the planet, part of another expedition, who looks remarkably like Charlton Heston.
Sure.
He discovers an underground race of humans who have been severely disfigured over time. And so they're not the humans you and I know. They wear these human masks, but when they take it off, they're pretty ugly looking and they look like they've been disfigured from years of radiation, right? And they're worshipping a nuclear bomb. And of course, all of these questions and themes come into play. And of course, that movie ends with them triggering the bomb and destroying the planet. So,
wow.
In the 1970s, that was the big fear that plagued us. You know, it was post-World War II, Cold War. We are worried about nuclear annihilation. It's a whole thing. But the third movie might be the best sequel of the lot. So in the third movie, two apes find Taylor's ship and they
Mhm.
take off just before that nuclear bomb is exploded. And just before the Earth ends, they take off and get caught in a time warp and are sent back to 1970s San Francisco. One of them is pregnant with a son, Milo, who eventually renames himself as Caesar. And then the last two movies following that are actually about Caesar's rise and the decline of man. And this cyclical idea of that's how we reached the first film where Charlton Heston crash lands in the far, 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 far future.
Right.
So they were trying to do this cyclical thing, but then by the time they reached Battle for the Planet of the Apes, which was the last movie, it got a little diluted and watered down, and some of the ideas were a bit lame, and no one liked that film. And it was the lowest grossing of the franchise, which kind of killed the franchise, right? But I think as a piece, they are definitely worth watching if you can get your hands on them because they're just very, very interesting pieces of cinema. Not just for the story they were trying to tell, but also what the studios were doing at the time. These movies came 1 year apart. They were like, this thing is making money. Let's just keep making sequels, all of them costing less than 2 million US dollars at the time. I think it's just quite remarkable. After that, they had a TV series, they had an animated show, both of which were actually really, really good and better than some of the sequels. But they never really performed on TV and got the ratings that the networks wanted. So they were kind of prematurely canceled. But very good franchise with like strong foundations. And I think it's because of those strong foundations that you could come back to it 30 years later and go, wait, maybe there is something here that we can play with. So to answer your question, yes, go watch those original movies. Even if you don't have time to watch all five, just watch the Charlton Heston, the first one.
And finally, at Esterification asks, whose side are you on, the humans or the apes? Apes.
Apes.
Apes. Apes. I don't care when humans die. My chest hurts when I watch an ape in trouble. I know it's fake. I know it's acting, but like all the talk about being emotionally moved when you see a person get hurt, I feel none of that. But if an ape stubs its toe, I want to cry.
But also, the humans in these movies make me so angry.
Yeah, but like,
Some of them are good, sure, but there is this thread of selfishness that exists. And I think that's why Caesar is such a refreshing character because he's born an ape, but still has this kind of loyalty towards the James Franco, John Lithgow characters who
yeah.
raised him and taught him everything he knows and taught him to be good and all of that stuff. And he's constantly battling those two sides of himself.
Mm.
Yeah, and I think that's why the movie works so well because even Caesar is torn between humans and apes. He knows that he is of one species, but then he has an affinity and he was almost born of another species. A lot of it is cheating lah. A lot of it is the movie making us feel so much empathy and sympathy for the apes. I'm sure if the apes were all like Proxima Caesar in this new film or Koba, we wouldn't feel. Actually, then again,
No, yeah, I was just gonna say, like,
I think about Dawn and I'm like, no, Koba has a point.
yeah, I was gonna say, like, even that bit where Koba shoots those two guards, you just go like, yeah, fuck those guys. Innocent, sure, but fuck those guys. I don't care. Yeah, fuck up the humans.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think we're all clearly on the side of the apes.
apes. Yeah,
All right. Well, let us know what you think of Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes once you've seen it. If you have any more questions, feel free to send them our way. You can also just hit us up on the Goggler hotline 012 524 5208. We can answer your questions in real time. I don't think this movie will leave you with too many questions, but there are some interesting things to think about by the end of it. So let us know what you think. Reach out. All of our social media feeds are GogglerMY. You can also email us on podcast@goggler.my. Thank you so much for listening. Keep your questions coming. This is Ask Us Anything on the Goggler Podcast.